First tonight, people in the UK have been voting in the British general election. The vote was called 6 weeks ago by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. It's the first general election in the UK in which people have to show photo identification to vote in person. Voters are choosing who they want to represent them in 650 seats across the UK, with political parties needing just over half, 326, to win a majority in Parliament. Polls are open until 10 p.m. UK and Nigerian time. Throughout election day, broadcasting rules dictate there can be no discussion of British political issues. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, the US President Joe Biden is fighting for his political life as calls grow for him to drop out of the 2024 presidential race following his dismal debate performance against Donald Trump a week ago. After a few senior Democrats publicly started to voice concerns that many have harbored in private about the 81-year-old's mental sharpness, Mr. Biden held an emergency meeting with Democratic governors at the White House. After the meeting, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said she'd been encouraged by what she'd heard from the president. But big donors are also turning against Mr. Biden as calls increase for him to release more of his medical records. An opinion poll shows that Mr. Trump's lead over Mr. Biden has widened since the debate, and some analysts say the stakes are now simply too high for the US president to ignore voters' concerns that he is not up to the job.
I had a great conversation with the president. Obviously, we, like many Americans, we're worried. We're worried because of the threat of a Trump presidency is not theoretical for governors. We've served when Donald Trump was president, and the threats to our nation were real. And so those concerns are real to us. And what we understand was a Trump presidency was chaos, destruction. A Biden presidency was dealing with COVID, using the science, investing in infrastructure, and working to the middle class. And all of us are trying to figure out and just want to make sure as governors, we're on the front line of many of these things. We're in states, whether they're swing states or not, where folks care and are giving us feedback.
It was a great conversation with the president and the vice president because it was honest. It was candid. I think that, we always believe that when you love someone, you tell them the truth. And I think we came in and we were honest about the feedback that we were getting. We were honest about the concerns that we were hearing from people. And we were also honest about the fact that as the president continued to tell us and show us that he was all in, that we said that we would stand with him. Because as Governor Walz said, the president has always had our backs. We're going to have his back as well.
I'm here to tell you today, President Joe Biden is in it to win it. And all of us said we pledged our support to him because the stakes could not be higher. On the eve of the 4th of July celebration, we talk about how we transition under a monarchy and a tyranny that our founding fathers fought against, that we risk right now descending back into that very same place. We will stand with the president as we fight that force being Donald Trump.
Well, for more on the US Biden issue, as well as, of course, the British elections, let's cross live to London and speak with Arise special correspondent John Cookson. Good to see you, John. Let's start with the British elections. Of course, voting day today. What sort of turnout has there been?
Hey Charles, good to see you. Yes, well, those polls close in less than 4 hours from now as 46 million registered voters cast their ballot. We don't know exactly how many, what the turnout is. We'll get that figure a little bit later. 7 million people already voted by post. As you say, this was the first general election in the UK where ID had to be shown, for example, a passport or driving license. This follows evidence of fraud in previous elections. The weather's been sort of good today down here in the south. It's been sunny and windy elsewhere, some rain, and that does have an impact on voting, especially for Labour, who want everyone who said they would turn out in favour of Labour would actually go and vote and to bring them the result that they want. We won't know the result until about 10 o'clock tonight with exit polls, and these are normally very, very accurate. So we'll be covering that here on Arise News at 10 o'clock, so join us then. But it's a pivotal election, once in a generation, and we're now just waiting for the result, which will be due, at least on exit poll evidence, in less than 4 hours from now.
Well, John, we'll leave that one there because there really isn't much more we can say because of the regulations that prevent the discussion of political issues on election day in the UK. But let's turn to a turf that you're well familiar with, which is the United States, and what's going on there at the moment with Joe Biden and calls for him to withdraw from the race. All this, of course, started from that pretty weak, pretty jumbled performance at that debate with Donald Trump. But Mr. Biden appears to be pretty clear now that he is staying in the race. I mean, how much pressure is there on him to leave?
There's a huge amount of pressure, Charles. A lot of rumours swirling around Washington, D.C. tonight. Thank goodness for Biden that it's a public holiday, July the 4th today. It couldn't have come at a better time for him. He's currently holed up in the White House with family members, and there is a huge amount of pressure which has been building for days since that disastrous performance on TV with Trump. All the talk this morning in DC has been about his possible replacement of Kamala Harris. A CNN poll put the two together and asked potential voters who they would vote for if Kamala Harris was standing instead of Biden. If Biden remains as number one on the ticket, Trump has a lead over Biden of 6 percentage points. That's Trump on 49 and Biden on 43. However, if the Democrats ditch Biden and put Harris forward as frontrunner on the ticket, she does much better. Trump on 47 and Harris on 45. Kamala Harris would be popular with black Americans, with women, with young people. She's bright, articulate. However, there is baggage with her. She tried to have a run for the presidency in 2020 and failed even before a single vote was cast. But certainly she seems to be the only viable option if Biden does stand down, and that's still a big if. The last we heard, Charles, from the Biden camp was in an email from the Biden-Harris campaign, and this backs up what you just said a short time ago. In it, Biden is quoted as saying, "Let me say this as clearly and as simply as I can. I'm running in this race to the end." So that couldn't be any clearer from Biden. However, the reality might be something different in the coming days. He has an important TV interview tomorrow with ABC. Some of the interview will go out on Friday, the rest will go out on Sunday. It's pre-recorded, and any gaffes on that, and that really has to be curtains for Joe Biden. So not much has changed from the last time we chatted yesterday evening. Enormous pressure for Biden to stand down, but Biden at the moment, for the moment, is standing firm. Charles.
And as we mentioned at the outset, John, Mr. Biden met Democratic governors last night, and they seemed afterwards to be confident in him and urged him to stay in the race, even though I think about 2 or 3 Democratic lawmakers, as you mentioned, urged him to leave. But I mean, 2 or 3 is a short list, isn't it? And just explain to us, John, the mechanics of all this, because the party can't really push him out or get rid of him, can they? It would have to come from President Biden himself, would it not?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, frankly, we're in uncharted waters here. Nothing like this has happened since 1968, when Lyndon Johnson decided he wasn't going to run for a second term. That was 8 months before the general election. It seems unclear tonight as to where things go. Biden can, in theory, be forced forced out under Amendment 25 of the US Constitution, but no one's talking about that at the present time. It seems that it will boil down to the Democrat convention in August in Chicago to sort out the nomination, but that was always the case. I mean, but we just assumed until now Biden was the front runner. So it's very difficult to be precise on this because America, as I say, is in uncharted waters. Interestingly, no word today from Trump, Charles. He's staying very, very quiet and out of it and letting the whole thing play out, obviously to his advantage. The White House press office fielding questions about Biden's health, and that's not what they want to be talking about at the moment. And Trump watching that very, very carefully, because all that's happening at the moment is to Trump's advantage. The Biden campaign ought to be talking about its policies and why Biden should be the next president, but it's hour after hour on US television, on the main channels, Fox, CNN, MSNBC. All the discussion is about Biden's health and whether and when he will step down.
And John, in your knowledge and assessment of Joe Biden, would you consider him someone who is stubborn and who would stick to the task no matter what sort of outside pressure there is?
Well, he's been in the business, has he not, for 50 years now. It's been his life, and it's been a life marked with family tragedy and ups and downs politically. It would be a massive thing for President Biden, who's 81, to step down. I mean, and also don't forget, Jill Biden is apparently still hoping that her husband will run for a second term, and obviously the pair are very close. That marriage is rock solid, and Jill Biden has a huge influence on Joe Biden, and it would be a massive step, as I say, for him to step down. However, he is a realist. He's been in the business for decades, and when he sees the signs, and the growing signs all the time, that his own party members are asking him to step down, then frankly, Charles, I think it's only just a matter of time before that happens.
And John, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier. If you did, I might have missed it. Reed Hastings, one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party, has called on President Biden to step aside. He's a co-founder of Netflix and gave more than $20 million to the party in 2020. I mean, as we assess how much of a blow that is to Joe Biden, is there a sense that money is starting to move away from his presidential campaign? Because, I mean, that appears to be the talk, even if President Biden insists that he's going to run. I mean, we know that money talks in a US presidential election campaign. Does the tide seem to be turning there?
Yeah, well, the donors are stepping back. We hear that, but I must say this, Charles, that there is the Biden campaign has a $250 million fund at the moment, which is considerable. And even if there wasn't another dollar added to that fund, he could get by in normal times. But it's the significance of the donors pulling out which is crucial here, and all adds grist to the mill, pointing towards the fact that he ought to step down because he doesn't have the backing of financiers. Charles.
Well, John, stay with us because we want to get your steer on this next story. Sirens have been sounding in northern Israel today as the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah fired more than 200 rockets and explosive drones across one of the world's most volatile borders. The attack came in retaliation for Israel killing one of Hezbollah's commanders a day earlier. The Israeli military says a number of the rockets and drones were intercepted by air defense and fighter jets, but there are no reports of injuries on the Israeli side, although several fires have been started as a result of the attack. In response, Israeli jets are reported to have hit what the Israeli military described as Hezbollah military structures in southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, in Gaza, after weeks with little public diplomacy, Hamas today said it had sent ideas to Qatari and Egyptian mediators aimed at ending its war with Israel. For its part, Israel has confirmed that it is, in its words, evaluating what it described as Hamas's new comments on a ceasefire and hostage deal. And Arise Special Correspondent John Cookson is still with me on the line from London. Thank you, John, for staying with us. We know you've covered the Middle East extensively, so perhaps more than anyone else, you can tell us what is going on there. Let's start with the latest barrage of rockets and drones across the Israeli-Lebanon border. This latest surge in violence in what has become a steadily worsening conflict.
Yes, having lived and worked in the Middle East for a number of years, I just find this story so depressing because people are being killed on a daily basis in this cyclical violence that happens between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. I don't see this escalating much beyond what it is at the moment. 200 rockets and drones sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, causing a number of deaths and injuries. But in the great scheme of things, Charles, all the parties, Iran, the US, Israel, Lebanon certainly, they don't want an escalation. So I think it's an upsurge in violence, and this is in reaction to the Israelis taking out a Hezbollah commander on Wednesday. He was Mohammed Nasser. He was driving in a car near Tyre, and his vehicle was struck by a rocket from an Israeli drone. The intelligence that the Israelis have staggers me all the time. They knew he was in that car, and they took him out. So what we're seeing at the moment is a reaction to that. I expect the wave of violence that we're seeing at the moment to die away in the coming days, and thank goodness for that, because going on in the background what seems to be serious talks between Israel and Hamas about bringing some sort of peace to Gaza. The Israelis are slowly winding down their campaign there at the moment from a high level, I have to say. But Hamas now seem to be saying that they are prepared to release hostages without a ceasefire, and that's a big step forward, and suddenly the Israelis' interest has been sparked, and they're willing to talk. Now we know that there are around 116 hostages unaccounted for, and in Israel, of course, the families desperately want them home, and Netanyahu would do anything, I think, to try to make that happen, given the political pressure that he's under in his country, especially from the families. So we're in a delicate situation with talks going on that seem on the surface to be having a better chance of success than we've seen in previous weeks, although I have to say that we have been here before and things have collapsed, but this time it seems to be slightly different. The Israelis are taking a more positive approach, and it seems to be because of that U-turn by Hamas on being willing perhaps to free hostages without there being a ceasefire first.
Well, that's a very hopeful analysis you've given there. We keep our sort of fingers crossed and hope the diplomatic needle shifts as a result of all of this latest development. But beyond that, of course, the fighting continues. What's the latest on the military and humanitarian situation in Gaza, particularly around Khan Yunis, which is the focus of the latest Israeli offensive?
Well, according to Hamas, we're looking at almost 40,000 people, Palestinians killed. I mean, just saying that figure cuts you to the core, does it not? And those attacks are still continuing, although the Israelis appear to be pulling back, having restored some kind of not peace, but some sort of move to satisfaction by the Israelis that they are tackling Hamas in a serious way and that they're making progress in defeating them. So there seems to be a step back, a slight step back from the intensity of the bombardment by the Israelis. But look, the Gaza-Israel situation is by no means over. I mean, the fighting is set to go on for a long time yet. I wouldn't like to put a time limit on it, but we're nowhere near the end of this conflict. Charles.
John, I really appreciate the time you've taken to explain all these stories to us. But just one more question before you go. We've got that, you were telling us about that barrage of rockets and drones across the Israel-Lebanon border. We're told that Israel intercepted most of those rockets and drones. But are you hearing any reports of any injuries or fatalities on the Israeli side?
There have been some, but to what extent hasn't been reported fully yet, because the action is still going on, and tonight I think we'll see more of the same from Hezbollah, because this latest cycle of violence it could go on for a few more days yet. But in the end, Charles, I can't see it spiraling out of control. Although I have to say that there are reports tonight from inside Israel that Israeli politicians and Netanyahu in particular are pushing for an invasion of southern Lebanon, but the mood music, as far as I can read it at the moment, isn't right for that, and all parties in this long-running dispute really want things to settle down a little bit, as it's done so often before.
John, thank you very much indeed. John Cookson, a RISE special correspondent, ranging with some ease there from the UK elections to the US Biden problem, and now, of course, to the Middle East. And he was talking to me on the line there from London.